One of the questions I get asked a lot, and I do mean a lot, especially from newer writers or writers who are moving from standalones to into series, and you really should, is how do you know when one book ends and the next one begins? And this was actually a question from one of my subscribers on one of my earlier videos. So if you've ever sat there and was staring at your manuscript thinking, well, shall I wrap this up here? Is this too much for one book? Am I stopping in the wrong place? Then you're not alone. It is actually a common problem. And today I want to talk a bit about that question, but I also want to zoom out a little bit first and talk about why series writing matters, especially if you're writing fiction later in life or building an author career that you want to last. Because once you understand why series are so powerful, the question of where one book ends actually becomes a lot easier to answer. So let's start with the big picture first of all. From a reader's point of view, series are incredibly comforting. Readers love settling into a world they already understand. They love the characters that they already care about. They love knowing that when they've finished one book, there's more waiting for them. And that sense of familiarity builds trust. When a reader finishes book one of a series and enjoys it, they are far more likely to buy your book two than they would be to take a risk on a completely different standalone by a different author. And book three after that, and book four after that, and so on, and so on, and so on. I know some readers who have got over 50 books in their series. That is reader loyalty, and that is one of the most important and valuable things you can help build as an author. From your point of view as the writer as well, a series does something else that's incredibly important, because each book in a series becomes the marketing tool for other books. So every book is like a lead magnet, or whatever you want to call it, for another book in that series. Every time someone finishes one book, you're actually saying, very subtly, of course, well, if you like this one, there's these as well. It means that you're not starting from zero with every new release. When you're writing in a series, you are stacking your work instead of constantly reinventing the wheel. And honestly, that is a huge relief, especially if you don't want to feel like every book launch is a fresh battle. Now, here's where some people get tripped up. They hear series and immediately think, oh, that means everything has to stretch across multiple books. And that's where confusion about endings usually starts. A good series is not one giant book chopped up into pieces. It isn't. That's not the way a series works. Every book in a series still needs to feel like a complete book. It needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even if the overall story arc isn't finished, the book you have written actually has to have an ending too. And this is where understanding plots versus subplots becomes a really good thing to understand. And put simply, that is actually very easy. A main plot, your main plot, is the big overarching story that spans the entire series. This could be a long-term mystery, a really slow burn romance. Maybe you've got some political or magical conflict in a fantasy world, or if you're just looking at a character's personal transformation over time. The main plot, in fact, I was going to say the main plot doesn't need to be resolved in book one or two or three, but it actually shouldn't be resolved in book one, book two, or book three. unless it's a 3-book series. Each individual book needs its own separate central problem that is resolved by the end of it. And that is the key to this. Each book should start with a clear question at the start and answer that question by the final series, the final chapters rather. Will the murderer be caught, for example? Will the immediate threat be stopped? Will this relationship reach a new stage? Will this mystery be solved even if a bigger mystery remains? When that question is answered, the book is finished, even if you've got another 10 books to write to get to the end. This is where I do see some writers accidentally sabotaging themselves. They might stop their book too early because they're afraid of giving too much away. And all that happens when you do that is that people, your readers' reviews will say things like, I feel like I've only read half a book, or I feel like I'm missing too many chapters. And then they feel deceived, which is not the point you're trying to make. Or worse, they keep going on too long because instead of trying to write a series, they're actually trying to fit everything into the one book. And this usually comes from the same misunderstanding that a series ending means no loose ends at all. But that's not what readers want. Readers are looking for a sense of closure and curiosity all at the same time. So they want to feel satisfied, but they want to be intrigued about what's coming next. So when you're deciding when one book ends, ask yourself, what promise did I make to the reader at the start of the book? So what was the initial problem that you seeded at the start of the book? Is that problem resolved at the end of it? If the answer is yes, then that's the end of that particular book. If it's no, then you probably need to be writing a bit more. Don't try and rush it just because you're writing a series. You can have long book series. But let's talk about subplots for a minute, because subplots are actually what make a series really shine. Subplots are those threads that carry across multiple books. So it could be like a secondary character's slow development, or there could be an unresolved emotional wound, or relationships that are changing between a group of people over time. And there can even be like a hint of a bigger danger that hasn't fully emerged yet. When I wrote the Cloverleaf Pack, originally it was just going to be a 5-book series. It actually turned out to be 13 novels and 2 short story anthologies, all within that world. But I didn't get a sense of the bigger danger, the Dark Elves, until about book 10. Yeah, I think it was about book 10. And what happened was that when that idea came into my head, I was like, yes, that now makes sense with this happening, this happens, this happening. And I was able to tie in, because I'm a pantser, so I hadn't planned any of this, but I was able to tie in everything, all the other resolutions that had happened in the previous 10 books into, this now makes sense. And the other 3 books continued that on. But you see, so subplots, all these other individual plots that I wrote in those stories, they should support the main plot of the book, but they shouldn't replace it. Like, for example, so you've got to have a resolution in each book. If a reader finishes book 1 and says, well, nothing's really finished, so I guess I'll wait and see. Said no reader never. Nothing's really happened at the end of book 1. That's not anticipation. They are getting frustrated. But if they get to the end of book 1 thinking, well, that felt complete, and I'm glad that this, that, and that happened, But now I need to know what happens next, because I've still got this hint that there's more happening, direct or not, but they're happy enough with the resolution they've had in the book they've just read. A really helpful way to think about this is to imagine every book as a season of a television show. And every season has its own storyline. Every season has its own climax and its own resolution. But the series as a whole is moving towards something bigger. You don't finish season 1 of a good show feeling like nothing happened. You finish it feeling satisfied and eager for the next season. And that's the balance you want to aim to with your books. I also want to touch on pacing here, because pacing plays a big role in knowing when to stop one book and start another. If your story naturally builds to a moment where the central conflict is resolved, the characters have changed in some way, and the immediate tension has been released, and then you find yourself adding just one more thing, yeah, you've crossed into the second book. A clean ending doesn't mean a quiet ending. It means that the story that you've put in book 1 has said what it's needed to say for now. So you don't have to tie everything up in a bow. You just have to make sure that you hit the climax of the immediate story resolution and then let things ease off from there, leaving your readers in anticipation of something better to come in the next book. Something else that might be worth mentioning, and I think I've touched on this already, but your series will evolve. Like, as I say, when I wrote the Cloverleaf Pack, I didn't have an idea about the Dark Elves at all until book 10. You don't need to know everything up front. You don't need a 10-book master plan that's carved in stone and you're going to stick to it no matter what. You just need a general sense of where the series is heading and a clarity. The clarity is important because that comes in for the book that you're writing now. So book 1's job is to introduce the world and the characters, for example. Book 2, you might be looking at deepening relationships or raising stakes. Later books might challenge everything that your characters believe in, but each book has its own role. And when that role's fulfilled, the book ends, not the series. Another thing, and this is something else. I wrote all these notes down and they're all a bit scattered, but this is actually quite important. Have you ever gotten to the end of the book and they've left you on a major cliffhanger and you think you're actually annoyed? Now, some people do use cliffhangers and they usually warn about it in the blurbs. That's fine. But when you are writing cliffhangers, you still need a core story that is defined within the book the reader has just read. So you can have a cliffhanger, but that should relate to what's happening in the next book, not the book they've just reading. You can have your ongoing character, your ongoing arcs and unanswered questions, but you have to answer some questions in the books that the reader is reading, not putting it all off to the last book, because your readers won't get there. Your readers won't get to the last book in a series if you keep shortchanging them before you get there, leading to a promise that may or may not ever happen. When readers trust you to deliver complete books in a series, then they will follow you through that series until they get to your grand finale at the end. Now, this still probably doesn't help about how you actually get to that point. So if you're sitting there right now and thinking, well, is this the end? Have I got to the end of my book, or am I stopping too soon? Try this simple test. Summarize your book in one sentence. If your sentence has a clear outcome, with a solved problem, a completed arc, and a meaningful change, because that's what books are supposed to do, then you're probably at the end of it. But if it hasn't done that yet, then you might still be midway with a bit more to write. On the other side of that, though, series writing isn't about stretching one idea as thin as possible. It's about giving readers repeated, satisfying experiences in the world they love. And once you shift your mindset from where do I stop to what promise does this book fulfill, then the answer becomes clear as well about where you need to stop and to start the next book. Don't worry about it too much if you are struggling a bit with this. Just make sure you're not shortchanging your readers. Series writing, like anything else, is a skill. It does get easier with practice. So just take a deep breath, trust your instincts, and just remember that every book needs to do its own job. And if it's done that, then you're doing fine. So what do you think? Is this something that you struggle with? Is this something you're having issues with? Is this something that you have wanted to play with but didn't want to commit yourself to a full series? Because it is actually a lot of work. Although, truth be told, I have done about, I'm actually not sure. Is it 12 series? I'm not sure. But the thing is that I usually end up, because my books are character driven, my stories, so I resolve my characters' issues in their individual books. And then the group that I've created, whether it be my assassins from Assassin's Alley or whether it be my men from Cloverley, in those situations, I make sure that the couple is resolved in each book. And then that bigger thing, the threat to their group, is what forms my series. And I have played with that in part for, Cloverley is probably my best example of that. My City Dragons series is another one that does similar things. But then I also have series like the Gods Made Me Do It series, which is, I was actually talking to my editor this morning and talking to her about it. And I said, basically, the Gods Made Me Do It series is a whole stack of individual standalones, all based around the same theme. And you can have a series like that too. My Arrowtown series is a bit like that. As I say, my Gods Made Me Do It series definitely is. My Hellhound Collar series has got a bit of tie-in with each book, but not a lot. So, yeah, it does depend ultimately on what you define as a series. But it is made easier if you do write character-driven books, because you can write yourself a series about numerous couples in a series, but just give each couple their book. And a lot of authors do that in the romance genre. But then you might have cases like I have my Necromancer Smile trilogy, and I also have the Magic Users of Greenford's trilogy, which is the same couple in 3 books in both series. And what I did with them is that I resolved that major issue, the major issue in the book, in book 1, but there was an overarching theme that actually touched on all 3 books and was resolved at the end of the trilogy in book 3. And that could be what you were writing too. If you've got any specific instances that you're not sure about, please drop them in the comments below, because I'm always happy to help and I answer every comment that I see. If you're interested in more information like this, then let me know about that too. I post long form contents on Mondays and Thursdays. And yeah, I love to hear from you. and I want to know how you're doing. And as somebody who has done nothing but write series, can I just tell you, it really is a good idea. So don't let the idea of writing a series scare you. Just throw a bunch of characters together and see what happens. But in the meantime, please keep writing. And yeah, if you need anything else, let me know down below. And until next time, I'll see you then. Keep writing, my friends. Bye.